To financial freedom at 35, Andrew announced, raising his glass. The conference room erupted in polite applause while I stood there, my smile plastered on like cheap wallpaper about to peel. The champagne tasted bitter, nothing like the expensive label promised. Someone had even brought in a small cake with happy retirement written in blue icing. Never thought I'd see someone escape the rat race this young, said Penny from accounting, eyeing me with thinly veiled suspicion. What's your secret? Smart investments, I replied, the lie burning my throat worse than the champagne. 3 days earlier, Andrew had called me into his office. The blinds were drawn. He pushed a folder across his desk. Performance reviews from the last 6 months, client complaints, documentation of advice contrary to company policy. I flipped through pages I'd never seen before. Signatures I supposedly made on dates I'd been out of town, client meetings that never happened. This is all fabricated, I said. Andrew leaned forward. Nobody will believe that. You have 2 options, Madeline. Resign with a glowing recommendation letter citing your desire for early retirement, or we release this file to the regulatory board. Your choice. 8 years at Greenwood Financial. My clients trusted me. I'd built my reputation brick by brick while others cut corners. And now, because I'd asked too many questions about those special investment opportunities, I was being erased. Now I stood in a room full of colleagues who either believed I'd somehow struck it rich or suspected something was terribly wrong but were too afraid to ask. Andrew's arm draped across my shoulders as he posed for photos. His watch, new, I noticed, probably cost more than 3 months of my salary. Speech, someone called out. I stepped forward, gripping my plastic champagne flute. Faces turned toward me, some curious, some bored, some anxious to get back to their desks. I'd like to thank everyone for the wonderful years at Greenwood, I began, my voice steadier than I expected, especially Andrew, for his mentorship. Andrew's smile twitched at the corner. I've learned so much about how this business truly works, I continued. Lessons I'll carry with me forever. Andrew stepped forward. Well, we don't want to keep everyone from their work too long. One last thing, I interrupted. Success isn't always what it seems. Sometimes it's about knowing when to walk away. I raised my glass. To knowing exactly what you're invested in. The room went quiet. For 3 heartbeats, Andrew's eyes locked with mine. A flash of uncertainty, crossing his face. Then he laughed, breaking the tension. Always the philosopher, that's our Madeline. As people returned to their desks, he gripped my elbow. Clean out your office by 5. Security will escort you out. I walked to my relegated workspace, the converted supply closet they'd moved me to last month, feeling dozens of eyes on my back. Inside, I closed the door and allowed myself 30 seconds of pure, silent rage. Then I pulled out my phone and sent a 1-word text. Done. Wait, before I continue this story, if you're enjoying it so far, tap the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. I read all the comments, so let me know if you've ever witnessed workplace injustice yourself. My name is Madeline Pierce, and until 3 days ago, I was a senior investment advisor at one of the most respected financial firms in the city. I built my client base carefully, mostly teachers, nurses, and small business owners who trusted me with their futures. People like my parents, who lost everything in the 2008 crash because someone like Andrew told them they were safely diversified. I'm 35, single not by choice but by dedication to my career, and until recently, I believed that playing by the rules would protect me. I was wrong. It started 6 months ago with the new investment packages Andrew brought from the regional meeting. Exclusive opportunities with guaranteed returns that seemed too good to be true. These will put us ahead of quarterly targets, he announced in the team meeting. Everyone needs to transition at least 15 clients into these vehicles by month end. When I asked to see the prospectuses, Andrew handed me sanitized summary sheets. Where are the full disclosure documents? I asked. Don't worry about those, he said, winking. The legal team has vetted everything. That night, I stayed late, using my system's access to dig deeper. What I found made my stomach clench. The investments were primarily in shell operations with virtually no assets. The projected returns were based on nothing but fantasy math. Worse, the risk profiles shown to clients rated these as conservative options, perfect for retirees. I drafted an email to our compliance department but hesitated before sending it. 2 years ago, Rita from the Phoenix office had raised similar concerns. She was terminated for performance issues a month later. Nobody had heard from her since. Instead, I scheduled a meeting with Andrew. I can't recommend these to my clients, I told him. The risk factors alone. Everyone else is on board, he cut in. Don't make this difficult, Madeline. But if these investments fail, they won't fail on paper, he said quietly. That's all that matters. That's when I should have walked away. Instead, I nodded and said I needed time to review the materials more carefully. He seemed satisfied, but the next day, my office was reassigned to the supply closet, temporary renovations that never ended. I began noticing other changes. My premium clients were reassigned for workload balancing. My meeting requests with certain clients were mysteriously canceled. The newer advisors stopped making eye contact in the break room. Then came the moment that confirmed everything. Late one evening, I accessed the system using Penny's login. She always used her cat's name and birthday for everything, and discovered documents with my signature authorizing transfers of client funds into those questionable investments, clients I hadn't spoken to in months. My signature, perfectly forged, dates that created a paper trail going back months. They weren't just pushing me out, they were setting me up to take the fall when everything collapsed. That night, I called an old friend from college, Nina, now an investigative reporter specializing in financial crimes. We met at a diner, 2 towns over. They're building a paper trail to frame you, she said after I explained everything. Classic scapegoating. I need to fight this, I insisted. Nina shook her head. Not directly. They've already prepared for that. She wrote a name and number on a napkin. Call this person tomorrow. Follow their instructions exactly. And Madeline? Delete this contact immediately after. The next morning, I called the number. The woman who answered didn't identify herself, asked pointed questions about the types of records I had access to, and gave me precise instructions. Nothing illegal, just specific information to gather, when to gather it, and where to store it. Most importantly, she said before hanging up, announce your retirement. Make it believable. Act defeated. Let them think they've won. So I did. I walked into Andrew's office and told him I was taking the retirement option. The relief on his face was immediate. Smart choice, he said. We'll announce it tomorrow. For the next 2 weeks, I played my part perfectly. I smiled through the humiliating retirement party. I thanked Andrew for his mentorship. I handed over my client files and pretended not to notice as my replacement, Tessa, was instructed to review my work for inconsistencies. The day after I left, I received a text from an unknown number. Package delivered. Maintain position. 3 days later, Andrew called. His voice sounded strained. Madeline, we should grab lunch. I have some opportunities we might discuss. At the restaurant, he kept glancing toward the door. You haven't been in contact with any clients, have you? He asked. No, I lied. Clean break, like we agreed. Good. He fidgeted with his water glass. The thing is, we've been thinking. Your expertise is valuable. We might bring you back as a consultant. Translation. They needed to control me. I'm actually enjoying retirement, I said, though I've been getting some strange calls. His knuckles whitened around his glass. What kind of calls? Oh, probably nothing. Some clients asking why they can't withdraw their funds despite the great returns they're seeing on paper. I directed them back to the office, of course. Andrew's face paled. That's good. Very professional of you. When he excused himself to the restroom, I glimpsed him making a frantic phone call in the hallway. That evening, Tessa appeared at my door, looking nervously over her shoulder. Her hands trembled as she whispered, "The numbers don't add up, Madeline." The performance statements show impossible returns, but when I try to verify the actual investments, she glanced back at her car, where her young daughter was watching videos on a tablet. I've got student loans, a mortgage. I can't afford to lose this job, but something is very wrong. I invited her in, made tea, and gave her the only advice I could. Document everything, but tell no one. Keep your head down. 2 days later, she texted me, got promoted to client relations, higher salary, less access to investment data. They were isolating her from the evidence. That night, I received another text from the unknown number, 72 hours. Be prepared. For what? I wondered. But something told me I'd know soon enough. The next morning, I woke to my phone buzzing incessantly. Text messages, missed calls, news alerts, all converging on a single event. I clicked on the first news link. Breaking. Federal agents raid Greenwood Financial on fraud allegations. Live footage showed FBI agents carrying boxes of documents from the building where I'd spent the last 8 years of my life. Reporters clustered around the entrance. I caught a glimpse of Andrew being escorted to a car, his suit jacket pulled over his head. My phone lit up with a call from Penny. Madeline, are you watching this? The whole place is crawling with agents. What happened? I asked, feigning shock. They're saying it's some massive fraud scheme, false investment returns, misappropriated client funds. Andrew and the executive team were just arrested. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Everyone's talking about your retirement. The timing. People are connecting dots. My other line beeped, Nina. I'll call you back, I told Penny, switching over. Turn on Channel 8, Nina said without preamble. You're about to become very popular. I flipped on the television to see a grim-faced federal prosecutor at a press conference. The investigation began 6 months ago following information provided by a whistleblower, she was saying. We've uncovered evidence of systematic fraud totaling approximately $94 million, affecting over 300 investors, many of them elderly. My doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw 2 men in dark suits. Federal agents. One called out, Miss Pierce, we need to speak with you. For one terrifying moment, I wondered if I'd miscalculated everything. Had Andrew somehow implicated me? Was I being set up as he intended? I opened the door, hands trembling. Madeline Pierce? I'm Agent Harlow. This is Agent Torres. We'd like to ask you some questions about Greenwood Financial. They weren't here to arrest me, they needed my testimony. For the next 4 hours, I answered their questions, describing the suspicious investment packages, the forged signatures, my abrupt retirement. We have reason to believe they were positioning you as the fall person, Agent Torres said. Documents found this morning suggest they were building a paper trail to implicate you as the mastermind. That explains the sudden retirement celebration, I said. Agent Harlow nodded. They needed you gone but accessible. If the scheme collapsed, they'd claim you orchestrated everything, then disappeared with your retirement as cover. Will I need to testify? I asked. Eventually. For now, we ask that you don't leave town or discuss the case details. After they left, I collapsed onto my couch, emotionally drained. My phone continued buzzing with messages from colleagues, and some expressing shock, others asking if I'd known what was happening, a few apologizing for believing rumors about my departure. That evening, a knock at my door revealed Tessa, eyes red from crying. They questioned me for hours, she said as I ushered her in. They think I was involved because of the promotion. I could lose my license, my home, everything. Did you tell them I warned you? I asked. She nodded. They already knew. They had records of our meeting, surveillance photos of my car outside your house. How did they? She stopped, studying my face. You knew this was coming. I chose my words carefully. I suspected something wasn't right. That's all. The FBI agent said you were lucky to get out when you did. Her eyes narrowed. But it wasn't luck, was it? Before I could answer, my phone rang. An unknown number. I should take this, I said. Tessa gathered her purse. I understand. Thank you for the tea. At the door, she paused. Whatever you did, I hope it was worth it. The call was from the same woman who'd given me instructions weeks earlier. You'll be contacted tomorrow about providing formal testimony, she said. Until then, say nothing to anyone. What about my clients? Their investments? Assets are being frozen pending investigation. That's all I can say. The next morning, my doorbell rang at 7:15. I opened it to find my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Winslow, clutching a newspaper. You worked at this place? She asked, pointing to the Greenwood Financial headline. My heart sank. Mrs. Winslow had mentioned investing her late husband's life insurance with a nice young man last year. Are you a client there? I asked gently. Tears welled in her eyes. They said I'd have enough for my granddaughter's college next year. Now the news says it might all be gone. I invited her in, made tea, and helped her call the victim assistance line the FBI had established. As I listened to her explain her situation to the operator, rage bubbled inside me. Mrs. Winslow wasn't wealthy, just a widow who trusted professionals to safeguard her future. That afternoon, Agent Torres returned with a formal request for my testimony. As we reviewed my statement, he revealed something that made my blood run cold. We found this in Andrew's personal safe, he said, sliding a document across the table. It was a draft press release, dated 3 weeks in the future, announcing the tragic suicide of former advisor Madeline Pierce following allegations of massive client fraud. The document included facts about my supposed confession note, details of funds allegedly hidden in overseas accounts, and quotes from devastated colleagues. They were planning to kill me? I whispered. We believe they intended to make it appear that way. Your signature has been forged on accounts in the Cayman Islands. The plan appears to have been to frame you, then eliminate the possibility of you defending yourself. I stared at the document, my hands shaking. The calculated ruthlessness was staggering. Who gave you the information that started this investigation? I asked. Agent Torres shook his head. That remains confidential, but I can tell you that whoever it was saved not just millions of dollars, but potentially your life. After he left, I sat alone in my apartment, replaying every interaction, every warning sign I'd missed. The walls seemed to close in. These people had planned my character assassination and potentially my actual death, all while smiling and toasting my retirement. I needed air. Grabbing my keys, I headed to the walking trail by the river. The evening was mild, the path nearly empty. I'd gone about a mile when a jogger approached from behind. "Beautiful evening," a familiar voice said. Nina fell into step beside me. We walked in silence until we reached a bench overlooking the water. "The FBI found a draft press release about my suicide," I said quietly. Nina nodded. "They're more thorough than I expected." "Were you the whistleblower?" She laughed softly. "No, Madeline, you were." I turned to look at her. "I never spoke to the authorities." "Not directly. Remember our hypothetical conversation? The unnamed source I discussed investment fraud with? The records you gathered following very specific instructions?" She shrugged. "Journalists protect their sources. Financial crime investigators follow evidence." Understanding dawned slowly. "You engineered all of this." I connected dots. "You provided the dots." She checked her watch. "The formal charges will be announced tomorrow. 37 counts of wire fraud, securities fraud, conspiracy, money laundering. Andrew faces up to 30 years. What happens now? Now, you rebuild. The receiver will attempt to recover assets for the victims. Your testimony will help ensure convictions." She stood. "Don't contact me again until after the trial. And Madeline, sleep with your security system armed." The next morning, I checked my email to find an interview request from every major news outlet. My phone showed 17 voicemails from former clients. A letter had arrived from the regulatory board requesting my cooperation with their investigation. The world wanted answers I wasn't ready to provide. I was making coffee when my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. "Hello? Madeline." Andrew's voice sent ice through my veins. "We need to talk." "How are you calling me? Aren't you in custody?" "Made bail an hour ago." "Listen carefully. There's been a misunderstanding." "Really? Was the press release about my suicide also a misunderstanding?" Silence. Then, "What press release?" "The FBI found it in your safe, Andrew. Along with evidence you were framing me for everything." His voice hardened. "You have no idea what you've done. This goes beyond me, beyond Greenwood. Powerful people are involved." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm warning you. Testimony can be discredited. Witnesses can be compromised. Think about that before you talk to prosecutors again." The line went dead. I stood frozen, the coffee pot overflowing onto the counter. My hands shook as I dialed Agent Torres. "Andrew just called me," I said when he answered. "He made threats. That's a violation of his bail conditions." "Where are you now?" "At home." "Stay there. Lock your doors. We're sending someone." 20 minutes later, 2 agents arrived to take my statement. As they were preparing to leave, one of them paused. "Miss Pierce, would you like protective custody until the hearing?" The question made the situation terrifyingly real. These weren't empty threats. The FBI believed Andrew and his associates were dangerous enough to warrant protection. "For how long?" I asked. "The arraignment is in 3 days. After that, we can reassess. 3 days in protective custody, or risk whatever powerful people," Andrew had mentioned. I thought about Mrs. Winslow, about all the clients who trusted Greenwood with their futures. "I'll pack a bag," I said. The safe house was a modest apartment in a secure building. No windows, reinforced door, emergency alert system. I was instructed not to contact anyone or use social media. 2 agents remained posted outside. On the second night, I was awakened by Agent Torres calling. "We're moving you," he said tersely. "Be ready in 5 minutes." "What's happened?" "Someone accessed the safe house location information. Pack only essentials." Heart pounding, I threw clothes into my bag and waited by the door. When it opened, Agent Torres and 3 other agents rushed in. "Stay between us," he instructed, leading me to the stairwell rather than the elevator. In the garage, they loaded me into an unmarked SUV with tinted windows. As we pulled out, I noticed a black sedan parked across the street, its engine running. "Is that—" "Don't look," Agent Torres said sharply. Head down. As our vehicle accelerated, the sedan pulled out behind us. We've got a tail, the driver announced. Torres spoke into his radio, requesting backup. Change of plans. Take Route B. The SUV swerved suddenly, cutting through an alley. The sedan followed. Our driver executed a series of sharp turns, trying to lose our pursuer. Who are they? I asked, panic rising. We don't know yet. Could be private security. Could be someone with interest in keeping you quiet. The sedan was gaining on us when police cruisers appeared, lights flashing. Our tail abruptly turned down a side street and disappeared. That was too close. Torres muttered as we pulled into an underground garage at what appeared to be a hotel. New plan. You're going into witness protection until the arraignment. The word hit me like a physical blow. Witness protection? But my life, my home, will still be there in 3 days. Right now, staying alive is the priority. As they escorted me through the service entrance, I realized how thoroughly my world had unraveled. A week ago, I'd been an investment advisor forced into early retirement. Now I was in protective custody, running from unknown threats, about to testify against the man who'd tried to destroy me. But deep down, beneath the fear and uncertainty, something else was growing: determination. Andrew and his associates had taken enough from me and countless others. They wouldn't take anything more. The next morning, I woke in a sparse hotel room, disoriented until I remembered this was witness protection. My phone, credit cards, even my watch had been confiscated to prevent tracking. I was now Ellen Thompson, a business consultant visiting for a conference. A knock at the door revealed Agent Torres with breakfast and news. Andrew violated bail conditions by contacting you. The judge revoked his bail an hour ago. Relief washed over me. So he's back in custody? Torres hesitated. That's the problem. When officers arrived at his home, he was gone. My momentary relief evaporated. Gone? How? Gone. Gone. My momentary relief evaporated. Disabled his ankle monitor somehow. We've got teams searching, but Andrew was smart, connected, and desperate. A dangerous combination. What about the arraignment? Postponed until he's found. You'll remain in protective custody. Days stretched into a week. I paced my hotel room, watched mindless television, and wondered if this limbo would ever end. Agent Torres brought updates. Andrew's accounts had been frozen. International alerts issued. Associates questioned. On day 9, Torres arrived with a woman I hadn't met before. This is Asa Kennedy from the prosecutor's office, he said. Kennedy was sharp-eyed, with the focused intensity of someone who never lost. We believe Andrew has fled the country, likely to a non-extradition territory. His passport wasn't used, but we found evidence of a private charter to Panama. What does that mean for the case? I asked. We proceed against the other defendants. His flight strengthens our position. Juries interpret running as admission of guilt. But we need you to testify at the preliminary hearing tomorrow. With Andrew still out there? After what happened at the safe house? Kennedy's expression softened slightly. We've arranged significant security. This testimony is crucial. Without it, some charges against the remaining defendants might not stick. That night, I barely slept. If Andrew had indeed fled to a non-extradition country, he could rebuild his life while his victims struggled to recover anything. The thought made my blood boil. Morning came with increased security. 4 agents escorted me to an armored SUV. The courthouse had been swept, access restricted. I was led through a private entrance to a waiting room. Kennedy met me there, reviewing key points of my testimony. Remember, stick to facts, no speculation. What if they ask about Nina, about how the investigation started? The judge already ruled that the identity of journalistic sources is protected. Answer truthfully, but without specifics. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with rows of familiar faces, colleagues from Greenwood, some looking ashamed, others defiant. Tessa sat near the back, giving me a small nod of encouragement. For 3 hours, I testified about the fraudulent investment packages, the forged signatures, the threats, and intimidation. Defense attorneys tried to paint me as a disgruntled employee, a failed advisor seeking revenge. Isn't it true you were underperforming before your so-called retirement? One lawyer asked. No. My client portfolio outperformed the firm average by 12% in the previous year. Yet, you were relocated to a smaller office. Performance issues seem the logical explanation. I was relocated after questioning the legitimacy of certain investment vehicles, the same ones now under federal investigation. Back and forth it went, each attorney trying to undermine my credibility. Through it all, I remained calm, factual, focused. When we broke for lunch, Kennedy looked pleased. "You're doing great. The judge is taking notes during your key points. That's a good sign." As we prepared to return, Agent Torres rushed in. "We need to move. Now." "What's happened?" Kennedy demanded. "Andrew's been spotted near the courthouse. SWAT team is moving in, but we're evacuating, miss." Pierce immediately. They rushed me through back corridors, out to a waiting vehicle. As we pulled away, I glimpsed tactical teams converging on the courthouse steps. "Was it really him?" I asked. Torres shook his head. "Unconfirmed. Could be mistaken identity. Could be intentional distraction." We drove to a different hotel, checked in under yet another alias. Hours passed with no updates. Eventually, Torres returned. "False alarm. Security footage shows it wasn't Andrew. But we're not taking chances. You'll remain here until the hearing concludes." 2 more days of testimony followed, each with elaborate security measures. Defense attorneys grew increasingly hostile as their attempts to discredit me failed. The evidence was simply too overwhelming. On the final day, as I stepped down from the witness stand, one defendant, Greenwood's chief financial officer, leaned toward his lawyer and whispered something that made them both turn pale. That evening, Torres arrived with news. The CFO is cooperating, offering testimony against everyone, including Andrew. Does he know where Andrew is? Not exactly, but he's provided account numbers, contacts, probable locations. Torres smiled slightly. The net is tightening. 3 weeks later, I was finally allowed to return home. The preliminary hearing had resulted in indictments against 12 Greenwood executives. Asset recovery efforts were underway for victims. My testimony had been deemed instrumental by the prosecution team. Still, Andrew remained at large, a shadow hanging over everything. I installed a new security system, changed my routines, looked over my shoulder constantly. Then came the call from Nina. "Turn on the news, now." The television showed footage of a yacht being boarded by authorities in the Mediterranean. The headline, "Fugitive Financial Executive Apprehended." "They found him," I whispered. "Better than that," Nina replied. "Read the ticker at the bottom." I focused on the scrolling text. "Arrest follows anonymous tip providing exact coordinates." Understanding dawned slowly. The tip wasn't anonymous to you, was it? Let's just say a certain financial officer made a deal that included revealing Andrew's escape plan. The rest was simple journalistic legwork. 2 days later, Agent Torres visited with an evidence bag. "Found in Andrew's possession," he said, handing me a sealed envelope. "It's been processed for the case, but the prosecutor thought you should see it." Inside was a list of names, mine at the top, with detailed notes about accidents to be arranged once certain offshore payments cleared. "He was planning this from the beginning," I said, my voice hollow. "Yes, but now he's facing additional charges of bail jumping, conspiracy to commit murder, and international financial crimes. He'll never breathe free air again." 6 months passed. Life settled into a new normal. I started consulting for fraud prevention programs, sharing my experience with regulatory agencies. The criminal trial date approached, with Andrew now held without bail. One morning, my doorbell rang. A courier delivered a thick envelope, case documents requiring my review before trial. Among them was a psychiatric evaluation of Andrew, conducted after his capture. I read it twice, pieces finally clicking into place. Andrew's pathological need for control, his belief in his own invulnerability, his absolute certainty that money could solve any problem. These weren't just character flaws. They were his fundamental weaknesses. That afternoon, I visited Nina at her office. "I've been thinking about Andrew's capture," I said. "The timing seems convenient." Nina raised an eyebrow. "How so?" "The CFO flips, provides information about Andrew's escape plan, and suddenly authorities know exactly where to find him after weeks of searching. Sometimes cases break that way, or sometimes someone ensures they break that way." I leaned forward. The CFO didn't just happen to flip. Someone approached him with evidence he couldn't ignore, evidence that would implicate him beyond what was already known. Nina's expression remained neutral. "Interesting theory, not a theory." While organizing my records for the trial, I found something odd. Remember those backup files I made before leaving Greenwood? They contain emails the CFO thought were deleted, communications with Andrew about my retirement and the plan to frame me. "And you shared these with investigators?" "Not all of them, just enough to secure indictments. I held back the communications about the CFO's offshore accounts, the the ones not yet discovered by investigators. Understanding dawned in Nina's eyes. So, when the moment was right, I made sure he received copies, along with a suggestion that cooperation might be his only option, particularly regarding Andrew's whereabouts. That's resourceful. I learned from the best. I stood to leave. The thing is, Andrew never understood the difference between revenge and justice. Revenge would have been watching him run forever, looking over his shoulder, never knowing when his world would collapse. Justice is making sure he faces every victim in court, sees every life he damaged, answers for every lie he told. And which did you choose? I smiled for the first time in months, a real smile that felt strange on my face. I chose something better. I used his playbook against him. He tried to make me the scapegoat, but instead, I became the catalyst for his complete destruction. He never saw it coming, because people like Andrew never believe the rules apply to them. That's why they fall so hard. At the trial 2 weeks later, I watched Andrew enter the courtroom in handcuffs, no longer the confident executive who had threatened me. His eyes, once sharp with calculation, now darted nervously around the room, landing briefly on me before quickly looking away. As I took the stand to testify, I realized the true revenge wasn't in his capture or even his inevitable conviction. It was in this moment, Andrew watching helplessly as I dismantled the narrative he'd tried to create about me, as I reclaimed my story piece by piece, as every word I spoke drove another nail into the coffin of his freedom. When asked why I had initially accepted the retirement option instead of fighting immediately, I looked directly at Andrew and said, "Sometimes victory isn't about confrontation. It's about patience, about recognizing when someone is digging their own grave and simply making sure they have enough rope to finish the job." Andrew's face went ashen as his own strategy became clear to him. He had given me everything I needed to destroy him while believing he was orchestrating my downfall. The ultimate irony, his attempt to silence me, had given me the loudest voice in the room. That night, as the jury began deliberations, I sat alone on my balcony, watching the sunset. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt truly free. Not because Andrew would spend decades in prison, but because I had reclaimed my power in the most fitting way possible, by using truth as my weapon. If you've ever been underestimated, pushed aside, or threatened by someone who thought they held all the power, remember this: patience isn't weakness, and silence isn't surrender. Sometimes the most powerful response is to step back, observe the bigger picture, and let your adversaries believe they've won, until the moment they realize they've orchestrated their own defeat. Like this story? Hit that subscribe button and share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever watched someone's carefully constructed lies eventually collapse around them? I'd love to hear your experiences.